You know, it's rather curious, almost comical, really, that in a world where everyone is obsessed with staying alive, very few people ever truly look at what life is. We spend our days in a grand chase, stretching time like a rubber band, clinging to youth, counting breaths as if hoarding coins, and yet the very thing that gives life its sweetness, its urgency, its music, is the one thing we pretend isn't there at all: death. Now, I don't mean death in the morbid, gloomy sense, the skeleton with a scythe that we inherited from the Middle Ages. No, I mean death as the great balancing act of existence, the silent rhythm that makes the dance possible. Because you see, life and death are not two things opposed to one another. They are two names for the same movement: the inhale and the exhale, the crest of a wave and its falling back into the sea. And yet, how we flee from it. We push death into hospitals, into corners, into euphemisms. We call it passing away or going to a better place, as though we were embarrassed by the very architecture of nature. We treat it as an error, a flaw in the cosmic design, something that, if only we could find the right diet, the right prayer, or the right pill, we might somehow fix. But imagine for a moment that the universe is not a malfunctioning machine. Imagine instead that it is an organism, a great breathing being, whose heartbeat is creation and dissolution, over and over again. In such a world, death is not the end of the show. It's simply the other side of the curtain. And without that curtain, without that pause, there would be no drama, no story, no meaning at all. Have you ever noticed how silence gives shape to sound? Music depends on it. A symphony made entirely of noise, without rest or rhythm, would be unbearable. So too with life. Death is the rest between notes. It's what allows the melody to move. And perhaps that's why we find it so frightening, because silence reveals what the music was trying to distract us from, the vastness behind it. You see, to be alive is to be part of a process, and processes must flow. But the ego, this anxious little custodian of identity, hates flow. It wants permanence. It wants guarantees. It wants to be the one thing in the universe that doesn't dissolve. And so we run. We fill our calendars, our refrigerators, our heads, anything to avoid the faint whisper that all of it is temporary. Yet, here's the joke. What if temporariness is the point? What if the very thing you call impermanence is not a mistake, but the essential flavor of being? The Japanese have a word for it: mono no aware, the gentle sadness of transience. The falling cherry blossom, beautiful precisely because it will not last. We spend our lives trying to glue the petals back on when the beauty was always in their falling. And so I propose, just for a little while, that we stop running, that we sit together in the peculiar fact that every breath we take is a tiny rehearsal for death. You breathe in, life enters. You breathe out, and there is a letting go. One of these days, you will breathe out and not breathe in again. And that moment, if you have lived awake, will not be a tragedy, but a completion. Because in truth, you were never separate from death to begin with. The same energy that makes the stars burn makes your heart beat, and the same stillness that follows the death of a star waits patiently behind your eyes. You are not facing death as an outsider. You are the very process itself, pretending to be a spectator. Now, that is a curious position to be in, to be both the actor and the play, both the wave and the sea. And if we can glimpse that, even for a moment, we begin to see that death isn't something waiting at the end of the road. It's woven into every moment of the journey. Each sunset, each goodbye, each laugh that fades into silence, it's all the same gesture. And so, my friends, let's not whisper about death as though it were a dirty secret. Let's talk about it plainly, tenderly, honestly. Because when you finally stop avoiding death, something extraordinary happens. You stop avoiding life. You begin to taste it fully, the sweetness of impermanence, the shimmering fragility of everything. And if you listen closely, beneath the heartbeats, beneath the breath, you might even hear the great rhythm of the cosmos, this endless pulse of appearing and disappearing, and realize, with a smile, that you are it. You are the dance, not the dancer. You are the song, not the singer. And when the song ends, it does not mean silence. It means the universe has changed its tune. You see, our trouble begins when we imagine life as a sort of straight road, a beginning here, an ending there, and we, poor travelers, must somehow move from one to the other without falling off the edge. That, of course, is an illusion born from the way we've been taught to think. Our education, our calendars, even our architecture, all move in straight lines. We talk of progress, growth, improvement, as though the universe were some ladder we must climb. But the world, if you truly look, does not proceed like that at all. Look at the seasons. They circle, not march. Look at your breath, in, out, always returning. Look at the tides, the heart, the stars, wheeling in great arcs. Everything moves in cycles. Even the idea of a new year is only our way of noticing that we've come full circle again. And yet, we humans, strange creatures that we are, insist on imagining that we are exceptions to this rule. We say, I was born, I shall die, as though life were a one-way ticket from nothing to nothing. We speak of our lifespan as though existence was stretched like a rubber band between two absolute points, birth and death. But if life were truly linear, if it moved in only one direction, it could never repeat itself, never renew itself. It would burn out like a match. What keeps life alive is precisely the cycle, the fact that everything dissolves back into what gave rise to it. The flower doesn't fall to destroy itself, it falls to feed the soil. The soil feeds the seed, and the seed grows again. You cannot have birth without death, just as you cannot have a cresting wave without its trough. In ancient Chinese thought, this is the very nature of Tao the Way, yin and yang, arising and returning, forever folding into each other. It's not a fight between opposites, but a dance between partners. Life and death are not enemies, but lovers entwined, each defining the other. To imagine that one should triumph over the other, that life should defeat death, is as absurd as hoping for an ocean with only waves and no depths. But the Western mind, it loves a battle. It imagines progress as conquest, conquering ignorance, conquering time, even conquering death. And in the process, it forgets that conquest is not creation, it's just another form of resistance. And resistance, you see, is what makes us tired. Because when you swim against the current of life's circular flow, you exhaust yourself chasing permanence in a world that has none. Now, let me tell you something quite delightful. You have never truly been born, and you will never truly die. Those are convenient words for points on a spiral, but they are not the whole of it. Birth is simply that moment when a pattern that has been sleeping in the universe wakes up as you. Death is when it closes its eyes and dreams itself differently. But the dreamer, the consciousness, goes on. Think of the ocean. The waves rise, they fall, they break, they vanish, and yet the water remains. You are not the foam on the crest. You are the water itself, momentarily taking the shape of a wave called a person. When that form dissolves, nothing has been lost. The ocean has simply become still again. If you can really feel this, not as an idea, but as a living truth, then something inside you relaxes. The great tension of trying to make life last softens, because you realize that life is lasting. It's been lasting since before there were stars, before there was time. You are simply one of the infinite ways it is expressing itself right now. And once you see that, a marvelous transformation occurs. Death no longer feels like a thief, and life no longer feels like a possession. They are simply two movements of the same cosmic breath. The inhale, that becomes birth, and the exhale, that becomes death. And if you pay attention to your own breathing, you will see that this pattern has been teaching you the secret of existence all along. Every breath you've ever taken says it. Inhale, the universe comes alive as you. Exhale, the universe returns to itself. Between the two is a pause, that tiny stillness where time itself seems to stop. That pause is eternity. It's the same pause between heartbeats, between thoughts, between lives. And so, instead of asking how to escape death, the wiser question is, how can I participate more fully in the cycle? How can I die beautifully, as everything in nature does, giving back what was never mine to keep? For if you can see life as a circle rather than a line, something profound shifts. You no longer live in terror of the ending, because you understand that endings are beginnings seen from the other side. And when you truly see that, not believe it, but see it, every moment becomes luminous. Each goodbye is also a hello. Each sunset contains a sunrise, and every death, including your own, is simply life turning the page. Ah, yes, the ego, the great imposter, the imaginary little landlord of your existence who says, "This is my life, my mind, my body." And of course, we believe it. We sign the lease, pay rent in anxiety, and spend our days trying to decorate the apartment of the self, even though the building itself belongs to the universe. Now, the ego is a clever thing. It's a marvelous social invention, really. You need a name to answer when someone calls across the room. You need a sense of self to pay taxes, write letters, and walk through doors one at a time instead of all at once. But we made the mistake of confusing the useful fiction for the ultimate truth. You see, the ego is a role, a mask, a character in the play. It's what the Greeks called the persona, which literally means through sound, the mask that the actor speaks through. And you, the real you, are not the mask. You are the awareness behind it. You are the stage on which the mask appears. But, goodness, how seriously we take the role. We say, I must protect myself. I must improve myself. I must save myself. From what? From life itself. The ego is terrified of its own disappearance, because deep down it suspects what we have just begun to explore, that it's a temporary pattern, not a permanent person. It's like a whirlpool in the river that thinks it's separate from the water, and so it fights. It clings to memories, this is who I was. It clings to ambitions, this is who I will be. And in doing so, it never notices the obvious, that it has never found who it is. It is always becoming, never being, always talking about its plans, its dreams, its traumas, anything to keep from falling into the stillness that might reveal the truth. There was never anyone there to protect in the first place. Now, don't misunderstand me. I'm not saying the ego is evil or to be abolished like some mental dictator. Not at all. The ego is a marvelous tool like a boat that carries you across a river. But when you've crossed, you don't strap the boat to your back and carry it over the mountains. You thank it and let it drift away. Yet most of us are staggering through life, bent double under the weight of our boat, the stories, the reputations, the fears. We can't dance because we're so busy holding on to the thing that's supposed to float us. And here's the delicious irony. The more we try to make the ego immortal, the more we suffer. Because everything the ego clings to is destined to change. Your body will age, your titles will fade, your friends will go, your memories will blur, the world itself is a moving picture. And the ego insists on pressing pause. But there is no pause button. You see, what we call dying begins long before our last breath. Every moment, something is ending. Every time you exhale, an entire version of yourself slips quietly into the past. You can feel it if you stop for a moment, that subtle fading. The you of 5 minutes ago is gone. The you of tomorrow hasn't arrived. So where exactly is the real you hiding? The ego doesn't want to answer that question, because it knows the answer is its own undoing. The truth is simple, yet frightening to the mind that wants ownership. You are not a thing that exists in time. You are the awareness in which time appears. The ego is a ripple on the surface of the sea, shimmering for a while and then merging back into stillness. But the sea has never been threatened by the disappearance of a ripple. Now, what happens when you see through this illusion, not intellectually, but experientially? A great laughter arises. You realize you've been guarding an imaginary boundary, the line between me and not me. You've been fighting ghosts with swords of thought. And when the fight ends, not because you win, but because you see there was never an enemy, then the whole landscape changes. You no longer stand apart from life, clutching it like a possession. You are life, the whole blooming, dying, pulsing, breathing process. You are not in the universe. You are the universe, temporarily pretending to be a person. And when this is seen clearly, death loses its fangs, because who can die when the one who thought it could die was never there to begin with? So, my friends, the task is not to destroy the ego, but to see it. To see it as you might see a costume you've outgrown beautiful, once useful, but no longer quite your size. And the moment you see through it, the moment you stop clinging to it, the universe breathes a great sigh of relief through you. You laugh, a cosmic laugh, the kind that echoes through eternity, and you understand, finally, that the person you thought you were was never more than a passing thought in the mind of God. Now, it's rather amusing that some of the most profound lessons about life and death come from one of the humblest creatures on earth, the mushroom. Yes, that unassuming fellow you find sprouting overnight after the rain, quietly breaking down what was once alive, turning it back into nourishment. The mushroom, you see, understands transformation better than most theologians. It knows that decay isn't an accident, it's the other half of creation. It takes what has fallen, what we would call dead, and through its mycelial magic, recycles it into life again. The forest depends upon this dance. Without the mushroom, everything would choke beneath its own abundance. Life would pile up like old furniture in a house where no one dares to throw anything away. So, the mushroom teaches us something vital, that endings are not failures, and decomposition is simply the earth's way of breathing. It turns out, nature never wastes a single thing, not a leaf, not a bone, not even you. And in a strange way, human beings have been rediscovering that lesson through the mushroom once more. For centuries, people in the Amazon, in Mexico, in Siberia, in India, have eaten these sacred fungi not as an escape from reality, but as a way of entering it more deeply. They call them the flesh of the gods, the food of immortality, the voice of the earth. Now, I'm not here to tell you to go out and eat mushrooms. That would miss the point entirely. The real magic of these things isn't in the chemistry, but in what they reveal when the chemistry dissolves the walls of the ego. For just a few hours, the little I that says I'm over here and the world is over there begins to fade. And you suddenly discover that the world you thought you were looking at is the very same world that's looking back at you. It's a sort of divine joke. You realize you've been playing hide and seek with yourself, hiding as a human being, seeking as a spiritual one, and laughing when you realize there was never anyone to find but you. People come back from such experiences saying, I saw God, or I saw infinity. But the mushroom might chuckle and say, no, dear, You didn't see God, you stopped not seeing. For a moment, the cataract of separateness cleared, and the universe saw itself clearly, without a name, without a boundary. And perhaps that's why, throughout history, such experiences have been treated with reverence and fear, because they strip you bare. They show you that control is an illusion, that the self you defend so desperately is made of paper and smoke. The mushroom whispers, "You were never in charge, my friend. You were being carried all along." When this veil thins, something extraordinary happens. The terror of death dissolves. Because you see, in that space, beyond the ego, you've already died, and yet you're still here. You realize that death is not the end of awareness, but the end of the illusion of separateness. The mushroom doesn't take you to heaven or hell. It simply takes you home. And you understand why the old shamans, after such visions, walked through the forest with laughter in their hearts. They had seen the cosmic recycling plant in action. They had watched the same energy that burns in the stars flicker behind their own eyes. And they knew that when the body returns to the soil, the dance continues perhaps as another person, perhaps as a tree, or perhaps as a patch of mushrooms beneath that very tree. So you see, the mushroom isn't a teacher of knowledge in the way we imagine, not a professor of facts, but a poet of transformation. It doesn't give you answers, it gives you perspective. It whispers, "You are temporary," and that's your beauty. It shows you that being alive is not a problem to be solved, but a miracle to be experienced before the wind changes direction. And when you've seen that, whether through meditation, breath, love, or a sudden burst of laughter, you understand what the sages have been saying all along. You cannot hold life because you are life. And to know that, truly know it, is to be free. You see, human beings have a peculiar obsession with control. From the moment we can tie our shoes, we're told that to live well is to manage life, to steer it, to master it, to be on top of things. But the strange truth is that the more tightly we grip the wheel, the less we actually steer. Life has a way of slipping through clenched fists, like water refusing to be grasped. It's rather like trying to make the river flow faster by pushing it. We thrash, we paddle, we struggle, and all the while, the river laughs, because it's already going exactly where it must. The harder you try to control the current, the more exhausted you become. And when you finally stop, when you give up in despair, you notice that the river carries you effortlessly. You were floating all along. Now, the ego, that industrious little foreman we met earlier, doesn't like this at all. It believes surrender is weakness. It says, if I don't plan, if I don't force, if I don't control, everything will fall apart. But look closely. Has it ever really worked? Has your planning ever stopped the rain? Has your worry ever kept the sun from setting? The truth is that the universe has been functioning quite well without your management for billions of years. Stars are born, galaxies collide, atoms dance, and you, a brief and beautiful arrangement of those atoms, come along and say, I'm in charge here. You see, control is the last illusion the ego clings to before it dies, because control implies separation, the one who controls and the thing being controlled. But life doesn't work that way. Life isn't a machine with buttons to press. It's a symphony without a conductor. Every instrument plays itself, and somehow, miraculously, the music holds together. So, surrender is not defeat. It is not resignation. It's the recognition that there is no you apart from the flow to begin with. It's what the Taoists call wu-wei, effortless action, action in harmony with the way things are. It's like sailing. You don't command the wind, you align your sails. You move not by domination, but by cooperation with forces far greater than your own. And yet, this surrender is a paradox. You can't make yourself surrender. That's just another form of control. The moment you say, I'm going to surrender, the ego sneaks in through the back door and says, yes, I'm very good at this surrendering business. No, surrender happens when you see clearly that control was never real. It's a kind of falling, but not into danger, into trust. The realization dawns that the ground you feared falling onto was, in fact, the same ground that has been holding you all along. This is why death frightens us. It's the ultimate surrender, the final letting go of every illusion of control. But what if death is simply the universe reminding you that you were never steering the ship, that you were always the ocean, not the sailor? Think of it like this. When you go to sleep at night, you don't force yourself into dreams. You let go. You trust. The body breathes itself, the heart beats itself, and the mind dissolves into stillness. Every night you die a little death, and every morning you are resurrected without effort. If you can do it every night, why not in life? And here lies the secret. When you stop clutching at the steering wheel, life doesn't descend into chaos, it becomes graceful. When you stop trying to control your thoughts, they begin to settle on their own, like mud in a glass of water. When you stop striving for happiness, joy appears uninvited, like sunlight through an open window. It is precisely the letting go that reveals the rhythm of things. Because when you no longer insist that life must obey you, you begin to hear how beautifully it sings on its own. The song was always there. It was your noise that drowned it out. So perhaps, my friends, control was never about mastery, but about fear. The fear that if we don't hold on, we'll disappear. But here's the revelation. Letting go doesn't erase you. It returns you. You don't vanish. You expand. You become the flow itself. And in that realization, the need to control anything simply evaporates. And then, for the first time, you are truly free. Because freedom isn't the power to make life obey your will. It's the peace that comes from realizing there is no separation between your will and life's. You breathe out, and the universe breathes in. You let go, and everything continues perfectly. And in that effortless cooperation, the dance goes on endlessly, beautifully, without ever needing a dancer. Fear is a most ingenious creature. It's the only thing that grows stronger the more you try to get rid of it. You push it away, and it hides behind the push. You resist it, and it feeds on the resistance. It's like wrestling your own shadow. The harder you fight, the more it sticks. Now, most of what we call living is actually a long, sophisticated struggle against fear. Fear of losing, fear of changing, fear of being forgotten, and above all, fear of ceasing to be. But notice how curious this is. No one has ever actually experienced being dead. You can only ever experience being alive. So the fear of death is, in fact, a fear of an event that never happens to you. What we fear is not death, but the idea of death, a thought, an image, a fantasy projected by the mind. And like all good fantasies, it feels terribly real when you're inside it. The mind whispers, you might disappear, you might lose control, you might be nothing. But you see, it's rather difficult to be afraid of nothing, because nothing has no teeth. So the mind invents teeth. It imagines the void as a kind of eternal darkness, a black hole waiting to swallow you. But darkness, my friends, is not the enemy of light, it's its partner. Without darkness, you'd never see a single star. And the void, instead of being a monster, might be the very womb from which everything is born. You see, the fear of death is really the fear of life's instability. We want life to hold still so we can feel safe, but it can't, and that's precisely why it's alive. A perfectly secure life would be like a perfectly still heart. Safe? Yes, but only because it has stopped beating. Fear feeds itself by pretending to protect us. It says, don't let go, don't trust, don't change. But what it actually protects is the illusion of control. It's the mind trying to keep its job long after it's outlived its usefulness. And we feed it every time we believe the whisper that says, if I could just fix everything myself, the world, the future, then I'd be at peace. But peace isn't the reward for controlling life. It's the gift of letting it move. Peace is what happens when you stop feeding the fear. Let me put it another way. Fear is like a child having a nightmare. The child screams, the parent runs in, and instead of arguing with the dream, the parent holds the child. The nightmare fades, not because the monsters were slain, but because the child remembers safety. And in the same way, when you stop fighting fear, when you simply allow it to be, to tremble and pass, it loses its power, and something extraordinary occurs. The energy that was bound up in fear transforms into aliveness, because fear and vitality are the same current of energy, just seen from different angles. When you fear life, that current freezes. When you trust life, it flows again as laughter, love, spontaneity. That's why awakening is often described not as becoming brave, but as becoming unafraid of fear itself. You see through the trick. You realize the monster was a mask. You turn toward it and say, go on, show me what you've got. And it dissolves into mist. And here's the paradox. The freer you are from fear, the more deeply you can feel. Because you're no longer avoiding the tremor at the center of existence. You can finally let the heart break open without clenching. You can love someone without the guarantee they'll stay. You can live without needing tomorrow to promise you anything. So, when you feel fear arise, and it will, don't treat it as a mistake. Treat it as a messenger. It's telling you where you're still trying to hold the river still. And the moment you see that, you can laugh, as the old Zen masters did, and say, ah, there it is again, the mind pretending to be in charge. Because when you laugh at fear, you starve it. And what remains is life, naked, unguarded, shimmering. The kind of life that doesn't need safety, because it's finally realized it's indestructible. Now, we arrive at a very subtle part of the human comedy, the personality. That charming mask we've been polishing all our lives, hoping it will convince the universe that we are somebody special. You know the one, the voice in your head that narrates your day, that introduces you to yourself. I am this kind of person. I have these opinions. I like this. I don't like that. Quote, it's the same voice that frets, what will they think of me? As if they were the jury and me were on trial. But let's look at it honestly. Who exactly is this me you're protecting? If you start peeling the layers, what do you find? A collection of habits, memories, opinions, fears, all stitched together like a patchwork quilt. But who's the tailor? Where is the self that owns these things? When you go looking, the strangest thing happens. You don't find a solid center. You find awareness, open, luminous, centerless. The person is more like a pattern than a presence. You see, personality is performance. It's not a bad thing. We need it for the play of life. You can't walk into a cafe as infinite consciousness. You'd have a hard time ordering coffee. So the personality steps in, bows politely, and says, I'll handle this scene. But the trouble begins when the actor forgets it's a role. When you start believing you are the part, you become trapped by it. You begin rehearsing instead of living. Most people, poor souls, spend their entire lives trying to make the mask permanent. They call it building character. They identify with the story, I'm the achiever, or I'm the victim, or I'm the seeker. And these are fine roles, wonderful dramas. full of laughter and tears, but they're still costumes. What happens when you take the costume off? At first, it's terrifying. You feel naked. You think, if I'm not my achievements, if I'm not my wounds, if I'm not my opinions, then who am I? And the answer comes not as a word, but as a silence. That silence is the real you, the awareness that has been watching the play unfold all along. When you see this clearly, life becomes wonderfully light, because now you can wear your personality like a loose garment. You can be serious when seriousness is needed, playful when the moment calls for it, and you don't get stuck in either. The personality becomes a tool, not a prison. It's rather like acting in a play when you know you're on stage. You can throw yourself into the part completely, laugh, cry, fight, fall in love, yet a small smile remains in the back of your mind. Because you know it's a play, you enjoy it more, not less. And this, you see, is freedom, not the freedom to escape the personality, but the freedom to see through it, to realize that the I you thought was a thing is really a verb, an activity, a process, like the flame of a candle. The flame looks solid, but it's constantly being born and dying in every instant. The self is the same. When you recognize this, insult and praise lose their grip. If someone calls you a fool, you smile, because the fool is just another role. If someone calls you a genius, you smile again, because you know the same. You're no longer flattered or offended by the winds of opinion. You let them blow through you, like air through bamboo. The ego will protest, of course. It will say, but if I stop identifying with my personality, won't I become nothing? And that's the grand joke, yes, precisely. And what a relief it is to be nothing, because then you can be everything. A personality is always limited, always defined. But when you see through it, you realize you were never the mask, you were the light shining through its eyes. And when the mask finally falls away in laughter, in love, or in death, nothing is lost, because the actor behind it was never born and will never die. The show simply changes scenes. So, my friends, don't throw away your mask. Just don't mistake it for your face. Play your role beautifully, passionately, with full conviction, but know that when the curtain falls, you are not the part you played. You are the stage, the audience, the light, and the silence that holds it all together. You see, once you've glimpsed that the personality is just a costume, something marvelous happens. You begin to notice that everything, not just you, but everything is wearing a costume. The tree puts on green in spring, gold in autumn, white in winter. The ocean dresses itself in silver at dawn and in black velvet at midnight. Even the stars have their costumes burning bright for a few billion years before quietly changing into something else. Everything is playing dress-up in this eternal masquerade. And when one costume wears out, life doesn't end, it merely changes its outfit. Death, you see, is not the destruction of form, it's the transformation of form. Nothing ever really dies. It only reshapes itself. When a leaf falls, it does not cease to be. It becomes soil, and that soil becomes the root that gives rise to new leaves. The same leaf that once trembled in the sunlight returns to dance again, only now as another form of life. The pattern goes on endlessly. Now, to our poor linear minds, this can seem frightening. We want continuity of identity. We want to be the same wave forever. But the sea laughs gently at such demands, for its beauty lies in motion, not in stillness. To freeze a wave would be to kill it. Its life is its change. So, the great secret of nature is this: everything is dying all the time. And that is precisely why everything lives. The bird sings because the song will end. The flower blooms because it knows it cannot hold. And in that impermanence lies the glory, because nothing lasting can be alive and nothing alive can be permanent. You see, it's our obsession with permanence that blinds us to eternity. We think eternity means endless duration, but eternity, truly understood, is not long. It's now. It's the timeless pulse in which all forms rise and fall. When you live without clinging, every moment reveals this eternity, sparkling, right where you stand. Look around you. Everything is shimmering with this endless becoming. That chair you sit on was once a tree, which was once light from the sun, which was once the dust of a dying star. The atoms of your body, these very hands, these eyes, were forged in some ancient furnace billions of years ago, and here they are now, pretending to be you. Can you see the joke? The universe keeps recycling itself, disguising itself, pretending to be separate things, but it's always just itself. The dance of forms, the endless game of hide and seek, the one playing as the many, and the many discovering they were the one all along. So when someone says everything ends, you can smile and say, yes, but nothing is lost, because every ending is simply a doorway through which life re-enters, differently dressed. And this, I think, is what all the sages meant when they spoke of liberation, not an escape from the wheel of life and death, but a joyful participation in it. When you see that you are not the spinning form, but the motion itself, you realize you've never left the dance floor. And when you truly understand that, you stop asking whether there's life after death. You see that life is after death and before it, and during it, and through it. The whole universe is constantly ending and beginning, right now, in every heartbeat, in every breath. And that's why the wise don't cling to forms, but they don't despise them either. They dance with them fully, passionately, gratefully, knowing that each step will soon dissolve, and that's what makes the dance so beautiful. So let the forms change, let the wave fall, let the music pause, because without the falling, there could be no rising. Without silence, no song. Without death, no life. And when you see that the dancer and the dance are one, you can finally relax into the rhythm of it all, trusting that the next movement, whatever it may be, will be just as perfect as this one. Meditation, you see, is nothing mystical. It's simply learning how to die a little while you're still alive, not in a grim way, not as an act of denial, but as a rehearsal in letting go. Every time you sit quietly, close your eyes, and allow thought to drift without grabbing it, you are practicing the art of dying before you die. Because what is death, really, if not the complete surrender of control? And what is meditation, if not the gentle art of doing the same voluntarily, gracefully, in small doses? When you sit still, the ego begins to panic. It says, quick, do something, think something, plan something. It fears the stillness because in the stillness, it disappears. But if you stay, if you watch kindly and don't interfere, the chatter begins to soften like a wind dying down after a storm. And in that quiet, something extraordinary happens. You realize you are not the noise, you are the silence beneath it. You are not the thoughts. You are the space in which they appear and dissolve. You are not the wave, you are the ocean noticing itself move. Now, this realization doesn't come through effort, you can't force it. Trying to meditate is like trying to fall asleep. The very effort prevents it. Meditation happens when you stop trying, when you allow awareness to simply rest in itself. Then, just for a moment, you taste what it's like to have no agenda, no identity, no boundary, and that taste is pure freedom. This is why, in many traditions, they call meditation the little death, because in that stillness, the I that keeps track of life takes a holiday. The one who measures, compares, fears, and clings gone. And yet, awareness remains. You die to the story, but you don't vanish. You simply awaken as what you always were, the witness, timeless and untouched. If you want to know what dying feels like, try truly exhaling. Follow the breath all the way out until there's nothing left to give. In that empty pause before the next inhale, you are completely gone and yet utterly safe. Then the breath returns on its own. Life breathes you, not the other way round. Every breath is the cycle of birth and death in miniature. Creation, dissolution, stillness, creation again. The miracle is that it happens thousands of times a day, and we hardly notice. We die and resurrect constantly, without any funeral or fuss. And this, you see, is the invitation of meditation to notice, to watch the micro-deaths already happening, the end of each thought, each sensation, each heartbeat. Every moment falls away as soon as it appears, and yet here you are, the continuity that isn't continuous, the background that never began and will never end. When you realize that, fear melts, because death is no longer a stranger, it's a familiar rhythm, a movement you've practiced your whole life. You see that dying is simply a deeper exhale, and that what you truly are has been exhaling and inhaling worlds since time began. So, sit quietly sometimes. Feel the breath move through you, the world move through you. Let the thoughts rise and fall like waves you don't need to chase. And if, for a moment, you vanish, rejoice, because that vanishing is the glimpse of eternity. That stillness is your home. Then, when the world calls you back, when the phone rings, the kettle whistles, the child cries, you return easily, refreshed, because now you know the secret. The one who dies in meditation was never real to begin with, and the one who remains has never been born. When the mind begins to rest, when fear loosens its grip, what arises naturally is love, not the needy sort that clings and bargains, but a love that flows like light, asking nothing, withholding nothing. You see, most of what we call love is really a kind of transaction. I'll love you if you make me feel good, if you stay, if you remember me. We make contracts in the heart, disguised as devotion. But true love, awakened love, cannot be contained by the logic of possession. It comes from the same source that moves the stars. It gives itself away endlessly. Real love is not about holding someone. It's about recognizing that you were never separate to begin with. When you see through the illusion of the isolated self, every face becomes your own face. The laughter of a stranger, the cry of a child, the rustling of leaves in the wind, all of it, you realize, is the same song playing through different instruments. And yet, to love like that, you must be willing to lose. You must allow every moment, every person, to come and go freely. Because love that does not permit change isn't love, it's control. To love someone is to give them back to life again and again, to let them grow, drift, transform, and even disappear. Most of us are afraid to love in this way because it feels like dying. And it is a small death of the ego that wants to keep, to define, to promise forever. But what could forever possibly mean in a universe that renews itself with every breath? The only forever there is now this heartbeat, this glance, this touch. You may have noticed, when you truly love someone, time dissolves. The moment becomes infinite, though it may last only a second. That's because love lives where time cannot. It's not stretched between past and future. It's the eternal pulse of being aware. When you begin to love without clinging, you discover that love never needs an object. It simply is. It radiates. You could be sitting alone on a mountaintop or standing in a crowded city street, and it's the same love flowing outward, inward, in all directions at once. You can love a cloud, a sound, a stranger's fleeting smile. You can love even the ache of love itself. And that, my friends, is freedom, not the lonely kind that pushes others away, but the spacious kind that allows everything to come and go within it. A love wide enough to hold joy and sorrow, birth and death, without flinching. When you see this clearly, you realize something breathtaking. The universe itself is made of love. The stars burn because they cannot help but give. The trees breathe out what we breathe in. The mushroom feeds on what has fallen and turns it into more life. Everything, everywhere, is giving itself away, and that giving is what we call existence. To live in harmony with that is to stop clutching and start participating. To let life flow through you as freely as it flows through everything else. To love not as a strategy, but as the natural expression of being alive. So when the time comes to let go of a person, a moment, a body, you do it not with despair, but with reverence. You bow to what was, you bless what will be, and you rest in the knowing that nothing real is ever lost. Because what you truly are was never the lover or the beloved. You were the love itself, pretending for a little while to be two. And when this realization dawns quietly, gently, perhaps in a single breath, all fear vanishes. You see that the dance of life and death, of meeting and parting, was never a tragedy, but a celebration. For you were never outside of it. You are the pulse, the rhythm, the silence between the notes. You are the universe remembering itself as love. And so, my friends, let go. Fall in love with impermanence. Fall in love with the very act of breathing, of being, of disappearing. Because when you truly fall in love with life, you will find there is no death left to fear.